South Hills, I'm so excited to share with you all the great things that God has been doing through our church this year. We've had over 48 people take the next step in their journey in their relationship with God and be a part of our Discover class, which is an opportunity for someone to get to know who we are as a church, what we believe in. The other thing that I'm excited to share with you is the amount of people who have stepped out in faith and have trusted God with their finances and started to tithe. And so this year so far, we've had 140 people step out in faith and believe God's word and believe God's promises. The next thing I want to share with you, we've had 267 people say yes to Jesus for the very first time in their life. And we are so excited to come alongside of them. And to all of our campuses, we've had 456 kids come to church for the very first time. That is unbelievable. God is moving through our church. We are seeing families come together, be bonded, grow in their marriages, seeing kids listen to the word of God for the very first time. And I just also want to take a moment. A few weeks ago, I asked you to step out in faith and join us in a movement that we were partnering with Jacaranda Housing. I said for every dollar that we gave towards Above and Beyond, that money would be dedicated towards helping Jacaranda Housing do what God has called it to do. We as a church raised $9,986 to support that movement. I want to say thank you, South Hills Church, for believing in God, for coming alongside of us, for having a generous heart, allowing yourself to make a difference in not only what we're doing here as a church, but what we're doing in communities.
If you're visiting us for the first time or watching us online, my name is Efraim Peña. I am the campus pastor here. It is so good to be with you this morning. And we are in week 3 of an incredible 5-week series titled Defeating Depression. We have been talking about severe anxiety and depression and how so many of us, right? So many of us, or actually so many people don't seek help when it comes to anxiety and depression. And because they don't seek help, maybe whether they don't want to admit it to someone else or even to themselves, they suffer in quiet isolation, hoping the sadness will somehow kind of disappear on its own. But, sometimes that can very well happen, but sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, what happens then? When the day turns into weeks and the weeks turn into months and the months turn into years and you find yourself down a deep hole, right? What do you do then? Is that the trajectory of your life? Is that what's going to happen forever? Or you're always going to be stuck in it? And we've been talking about how do we defeat depression. And I give the disclaimer, and I'll continue to give it, that I am no expert on this, right? But we've put together as a team, we've put together all of our South Hills pastors, we've put together a team of clinical psychologists and psychiatrists, and we put books together and we put resources and kind of come up with the best way possible. We've talked to people that are suffering currently through depression. We've talked about people that have defeated depression, and we've come up with things that we felt kind of will help people that are going through this. But in no way, in no shape or form are the things that I'm saying the wherewithal to getting you out of depression, right? There's going to be a combination. There's going to be more to it than just coming to church on a Sunday, than just praying about it. It requires more. It may require professional help. It may require medicine. There's a lot to it. And so I want to make sure that when you leave here, you're not saying, my pastor said A, B, and C. I am not the doctor. Don't go running around and saying, we want to give you tools, right? We want to suggest things that you can actually go and begin to apply, but that are going to lead you, if the need is there, to seek professional help. Alrighty? So with that being said, in week 1, we talked about what depression looks like. Last week, we talked about why people who are suffering from it do not seek help. And if you download the Church Center app, you can actually go and watch those messages over again, or you can actually share it with people that you may know that are currently going through this, right? But today's message, we're going to address why can't depressed people just snap out of it? Why can't the people that are feeling depressed, are feeling overwhelmed with anxiety, just snap out of it? Like, what's the deal? So let me start off with this question as I've done for so long. Have you ever been annoyed about a complaint that someone has kept making over and over and over again? Like, they just, it's like, dude, would you stop already? Their complaint is ongoing. Maybe it's the stupid paper towel holder in your house that you pull it, the whole thing comes off, right? Because for somehow the little springs are not strong enough and it just comes off. But everybody, once they pull it, no matter how many times you tell them, do it gently, do it to the left, right? They just pull it and the whole thing's come down. Or maybe it's that annoying microwave in your office that sounds like the timing belt is off. Like, was that just my office, right? Or the screen door. No matter, every time you open and close it, it jumps off the track. And you got to stand out there trying to fix it and make it right, pop the wheel in. And it's just annoying. Or my favorite at home, nothing fits me. I got 5 of them. 5 of them at home. Nothing fits me. I got nothing to wear, right? I just feel the eyes are just on me right here. I see that, right? And at first we listen, we're empathetic with it, right? The next time or two, we're still understanding, we're still supportive, trying to be more like Jesus, right? But then the next few times after that, now we're a little annoyed. Now we're a little annoyed, but we make practical suggestions, right? Or 2 or 3, or repeat the original suggestion from 10 times ago that we said before. Maybe we offer to personally help or sacrifice or do whatever. But our patience it's wearing thin. And so by the umpteenth time, we kind of hit this wall of, dude, what do I have to do to not hear about this anymore? Like, what do I got to say? Where do I got to go so that I don't have to hear you complain about this again? Ever been there? If you haven't, you're lying. Because I think we've all been there. Now, some of us hit the wall a bit quicker than others. In fact, some skip over the listening, the empathy, and the help stage altogether. We don't want to be bothered by other people's issues. And just a side note, if that's probably something that that's something that you probably should kind of address, because you don't want to be thought of as a jerk. So just a side note, if you're like bypassing other people's complaints without hearing them, just letting you know. If you want to save your marriage, letting you know. But here's the thing, even the most kind-hearted, helpful, and caring amongst us can actually get to that place. There's actually a term for this, and it's called compassion fatigue. Compassion tiredness, right? It's the indifference to charitable appeals on behalf of those who are suffering, experienced as a result of the frequency of number of such appeals. In other words, you're tired of hearing the people complain about their needs, about what is going on in their world, right? And the number of times that they're doing it. And so you are compassion fatigued. And here's the heartbreaking reality, friends, about this or behind this. Feeling fatigued about someone's ongoing need for compassion does not mean that they still have a legitimate need, or they don't still have a legitimate need for ongoing compassion. In other words, just because you are tired of hearing someone complain over and over and over about the need, about what they're going through in life, does not negate the fact that they are still going through that issue. You cannot pretend or close your ears or close your eyes to the fact that there is still a need. Does that make sense? And many of us have no idea. We don't have a clue on what to do with that inconvenient reality. This happens to a lot of people who are in close proximity or in a relationship to those who are dealing with chronic illnesses, right? Like long, stretched out bouts of sickness or physical disabilities or mental health issues like severe depression or steady situational or social obstacles like discrimination and poverty and unemployment. And our exhaustion often pushes us to this place. Like, we don't want to admit to it, but it'll eventually come to the surface where we say things, man, can we just be done with this? Like, can we just really be done with this? Can we move on from here? At the very least, can we just stop talking about it? Because I don't want to hear it. You told me last year, you told me again at the beginning of the year, you told me last week, and you're telling me again today. Like, really, come on. And the thing is that, yeah, we could move on, and sometimes we do, but have we really put it to rest? Has it been truly fixed? You see, being silent about it isn't the same thing as solving it. No matter how many times you try to sweep it under the rug, no matter how many times you try to pretend it doesn't exist, that your friend, that your spouse, that your children, that your aunt, that your BFF, that your co-worker has these issues and it's annoying the heck out of you, it doesn't mean that it's gone away. You pretending like everything is perfect does not mean that they no longer have this issue. Often people continue to complain about an issue because it still exists. Nothing has been done about it. The person hasn't received the help that they need. No matter how much we and they wish it didn't exist, it still does. No matter how much easier that would make all of our lives, it's still there. Right? It's like that closet in your house. No matter how many times you close that door, once you open that door, it's still there. That mess is still there. No matter how many times I tell my kids, you get 2 pairs of shoes on the rack. The rest got to go. No matter how many times I walk by that rack and pretend not to look at it, they're all there. The shoe collection. And so this question lingers inside both the person that is suffering and those in proximity to the sufferer. Why can't they just snap out of it? Why can't I just snap out of it? And here's the reason why. Systematic problems require systematic solutions. In other words, the problems that we are seeing, they're not just on one level. They're just not one-dimensional. There's tiers to that problem. And if those problems have tiers, the reality is that the solution will also have tiers and levels. It's not a one-stop fix-it kind of deal here. And that's hard for society, a society that's obsessed with overnight miracle cures. We live in a world that says, hey, we need this fixed and we need it fixed yesterday. Get over it. Let's go. Yesterday at Noah's basketball game, she wasn't feeling well. And I, as her dad, have to navigate the point where the feelings of not physically feeling well is kind of blurred with emotionally not feeling well. And I got to navigate and help her through that process. And so the eyes are swelling up with holding as much of those tears back. And I have to try to help her push through that because there's still game going on. And trying to find that balance. And I cannot pretend that it does not exist. I can't just sweep it about, pat her on the butt and say, go get him. Because there's more to it. Church, when it comes to depression, there's no simple, singular cause to it, which means that there's no singular or simple solution to it. Not all depression is the same. And it's not all at the same level of severity, right? But that doesn't mean that any kind of recovery is hopeless. There is hope. There are solutions. What it means is that just because this one thing helped your 32-year-old sister through postpartum depression in about 3 weeks doesn't mean that the same thing will get the same results for your 19-year-old son in the same amount of time. Does that make sense? Here's what we do know. We know that depression is the result of deficiencies, lack thereof, in 3 basic categories. 1, nature, which is biology and brain chemistry. 2, nurture, which is parenting and patterns in life, right? Our upbringing. And number 3, in neighborhood, which is who you surround yourself with and what you have access to. And so when there are deficiencies or lack thereof of things that are helping, of support and encouraging in those 3 areas, depression will begin to show its face. And I want to unpack these things in more detail and give you kind of a checklist, if you would, to help you identify what to address, how to address it, and in what order. But first, I want to share with you a story from the Old Testament of a prophet who drops into deep depression. And the surprising way God kind of suggests he start to tunnel out. So let me give you some context here, right? God uses Elijah to speak to people on his behalf. He predicts a drought in the land, and sure enough, it happens. And then he holds a contest on a mountain to prove whose God is more powerful than the other. He confidently calls fire from heaven, and he proves that his God is real and kills all the prophets of the false gods. And then he receives a threat. He receives a threat from the evil queen, and he panics. He panics, and so he quickly runs away and becomes suicidal. A little crazy, right? To think that all this has transpired. So check out the story. We're going to find it in 1 chapter Kings, chapter 19. We're going to kind of dip and dab, jump in and out of it, starting in verse 3. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. So he gets to this town, and he decides to leave his servant there. Why? Because he then went on alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down on the solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. Now, to me, I'm not a doctor or anything like it, but that sounds like depression. And notice that it's triggered by a certain set of circumstances. It just wasn't one thing. There was a certain set of circumstances that led him to feel the way he feels. But it's disproportionate to those circumstances. How will God respond? Will he tell him to pray harder? Will he tell him to have more faith? Will he tell him to memorize more scriptures? Or would he just tell him to tell the devil, not today? Not today, devil, not today, right? So let's keep reading. Verse 5. Then he lay down and slept under the broom tree, but as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, get up and eat. Get up and eat. Now, that doesn't sound super spiritual, right? The angel comes down and says, get up and eat. And if it doesn't sound super spiritual to you, then it's because we need to expand what our definition of spiritual is. The advice is get up and eat something so that your brain has the fuel and the nutrients it needs to function properly. The angel of God, sent by God to Elijah in his sleep on God's behalf, and the angel suggests that he solve what he's feeling, more of a spiritual or emotional problem, by doubling down on his intake, right, or caring for his physical body. I find that absolutely interesting. Why? Because some spiritual or emotional breakthroughs require you to first address your physical issues. Some spiritual or emotional breakthroughs require you to first address physical issues. Sometimes we're praying for God to give us a breakthrough. And his response, like with Elijah, is breakfast. You need help with how you're feeling? Look at how you're eating. But the thing is that we don't always like that, do we? We don't like those answers. God, do something about my constant fatigue. I'm always tired. I will. Start sleeping more. God, help me with my anger issues. I will. Start by cutting your sugar intake in half. God, help me with my anxiety level. I will. Start by getting 30 minutes of exercise 3 times a week. God, help me with my relational dysfunction. I will. I will. Start by not living in the same house with that person who verbally abuses you or threatens the physical safety of you and your children. God, help me to not be so depressed that I cannot even get out of bed. I will. Start by seeing a psychiatrist and taking the right medication to boost your brain chemistry. By the way, the inverse is true as well. Some physical breakthroughs require you to first address spiritual or emotional issues. God, you got to help me sleep better. I will. But start by forgiving your dad. What? No. No. That's not connected to this, God. Isn't it though? Sometimes it's more convenient, church, to compartmentalize your life than to confront some shadowy corner of it, which is a mostly Western idea, by the way. That doesn't derive from Jesus' teachings. The ancient Jews believed that the different dimensions of life aren't isolated, they're integrated. There's a connection between it. Here's what this means when it comes to defeating depression. In verse 6, it says, because depression is a whole person affliction, right? The result of nature and nurturing and neighborhood, healing requires a whole person approach. In other words, there's a lot more to it. And once you wrap your head around this reality, you'll realize how brilliant the angel's advice really was. When you understand that the issues that we're going through are not because of just one surfacey concern, that there's more to it. And it's going to require more of an effort and more help and more support than you originally thought. You start seeing how this plays out. Verse 6 and 7, so he looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and laid down again. Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. Did you catch that? He had to change up. He didn't just need one good night of sleep, not just one good meal. He needed several. He needed several. He didn't just eat one healthy meal. He ate several, multiple healthy meals. You see, physical restoration is a process, church, and so is physical deterioration. It doesn't just happen overnight. There are things that, as Monica was talking about in her group, there are things that spiral us down, and there's things that spiral us up. It is a step-by-step process. For some of us even know what the process needs to be. We know what the process needs to be. We just don't want to deal with it, right? We just don't want to deal with it. We like to give ourselves full credit for knowing what needs to be done, even though we don't like following through. God provided the path, but Elijah, he still had to walk it out. God was giving him solutions. He was giving him a direction to get better, to get out of what he was feeling. But in the end, Elijah was the one that needed to apply it. He needed to do it. When it comes to this holistic health, most of us aren't lacking the right information. We lack constant or consistent application. Woo! We like to talk the talk. Oh, I heard the answer on this preaching. My favorite pastor that goes to another church in another state. Oh, he's my pastor, right? That's who I listen to. He's the one that guides me, and he gave me this information. It was incredible. So what are you doing with it? Nothing. Right? We like saying we know the answers to A, B, C, and D, but are we really ready to begin to apply to our life in a consistent way? Verse 8 says, so he got up and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights into Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. So let's just clarify. Let's just go back to that moment. He didn't have a Tesla where you can let go of the wheel and let it drive. He didn't have a navigational system to punch in, hey, can you get me to Mount Sinai in the 30 minutes? He didn't have a cooler, one of those Yeti things. He didn't have that with him. He didn't have one of those Yeezy slippers that are cushiony when you walk and bounce, right? He didn't have a nice sweatsuit to be all comfy on the way there. No, he didn't have all of the luxuries that you and I would want when we go on a road trip. What he had was what God told him. He did what God asked of him. And God prepared him for the challenges that were going to lie ahead. Think about our categories: nature, nurture, and neighborhood as it relates to what God has Elijah do to fight his depression. He eats, drinks, and sleeps and hikes. Nature, biological. He pulls him out of his normal routine, the one that wasn't working for him, by the way, and has him repeat these new healthy habits over and over again. Nurture, patterns, right? And that takes 40 days. So it wasn't an overnight fix. It wasn't an overnight fix. And then God tells him in the very next section of Scripture to recruit and partner himself with someone else in order to face what's in front of him. In other words, neighborhood, people that he would surround himself with. One thing that I love about this story is that God never shames Elijah for what he was going through. He never puts him out on blast. He never puts it on Facebook, right? He never just starts gossiping to somebody else about what Elijah was going through, about being in a dark place. And he never rushes him to like, come on, get with it, get it going. No, because in reality, the pressure of just snap out of it never comes from God. That's not of God. That's not how God would handle this situation. He didn't handle it that way back then, and he's not going to handle it that way today. In fact, that pressure, that ignorance, that comes from our culture. That comes from people that we are surrounded by. Depression develops slowly, and it dissipates much the same way. It takes time to tunnel out, church. You can't pay $19.99 and get no shipping and handling fee and get an answer. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't happen immediately. It's a process, and that process requires perseverance. Hebrews 10:36 reminds us, patient endurance is what you need now so that you will continue to do God's will. Then you will receive all that he has promised. But how do we know? How do we know what to address and persist at? Because sometimes, truth is, we're stuck because we refuse to address anything. Maybe you've been there. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it now. I don't want to talk about it tomorrow. I don't want to talk about it next week. In fact, I'm just going to pretend like it doesn't exist. Or we address the wrong thing. But man, I'm feeling more like this. Well, I don't know how I'm feeling, but I'll try this first, and then maybe that. I don't know. Maybe I'll call a friend. Maybe they'll tell me. Or we don't address all the things. Or we don't create a rhythm to address them for a long enough time for it to really matter. And maybe you don't feel like all the choice, or maybe you feel like all of the choice has been taken out of it. Maybe trying to get better isn't even a thought for you because maybe you just want to check out. And if that's the case, then the immediate first step for you is to see a doctor. To see a doctor and seek professional help. Church, the reality is that your brain is designed to do whatever it needs to do in order to keep you alive. That's the way your brain was designed, to do whatever you need to do to keep you alive. That's why if you throw anybody in the water just for fun, the first thing they do is like, ah, and their brain is trying to trigger, gotta get up, gotta get up, gotta get up, right? So if you stop caring to live or to die, then that's evidence that something's not working properly. Something is not right, and you need to seek immediate help to balance your brain chemistry. And maybe today you're not at that level, but maybe you're somewhere else on the spectrum. I want to give you a checklist real quickly to help you examine what contributors to your mental health might need to be addressed. When it comes to nature, biology, and brain chemistry, what sort of foods are you eating? How much of it is healthy? How much are you moving your body? How much sunshine are you getting? How much sleep are you getting? When it comes to nurture, right, the parents, is there trauma in your childhood you've not fully addressed? What have you been taught to value or not value? What behaviors have you picked up that spiral you? What are your triggers? And when it comes to your neighborhood, who you're surrounding yourself with, what you have access to, maybe you need to ask yourself, what meaningful work are you consistently contributing to? What do you need to spend time with? What do you need to spend time with, and what's their overall effect on you? What boundaries do you have on your time, technology, energy, and activities? Do the environments you frequent the environments that you frequently visit build or drain your energy? I'm going to wrap this up. Here's a question. I know that was a lot to take in that 30 seconds, but here's a question that all of us can begin to answer now, later in the day, this evening, throughout the week. And that is, which aspect of your emotional health might you need to explore and address? Which aspect of your emotional health might you need to explore and address? When it comes to your biology and your brain chemistry, when it comes to your parents and patterns, or who surrounds you and what you have access to. What are those things? What aspect of these things must you address and explore? Because much like Elijah in the story, all of the biological factors are in place for depression. Right? They're all there. But its onset is often initially triggered by an overwhelming circumstance. But for a lot of us, it remains long after the circumstances have subsided. Long after those circumstances have passed and gone, we begin to feel the way we feel. And so by the time we realize that we're depressed, we may be so far removed from the circumstances that kind of set it off in the first place that we can't identify where it came from. In other words, when we look at Elijah's story, we can say, oh, this happened first, and then this happened, and this happened. Oh, we can see it. It's put in the story, and we can grab it from there. But sometimes for us, that very initial thing started as a kid. And now where we find ourselves, it's hard to connect the dots to that very, very beginning. And so we feel trapped and helpless about certain things that blinds us to the help and support that we have in other things and around us. And when we come to believe that there's nothing that we can do to make anything better, then we bottom out. We bottom out. But I want to tell you this morning that fortunately for us, that's never completely true. That there is a way, that there is hope, that there is help, that you can find it. And even though you cannot trace it back to the initial beginning of where it came about at this moment, that there is help for us. So what can we control? What can we take control of that we surrendered control of? What can you take control of that you've surrendered control of, that you've given up on? What can you take back and say, I need this. I need this to take my first step. I need this to take my second step. I need this to identify and analyze and explore and address the issues that I'm going through. Whether it is something in the brain, whether it's a relationship with your parenting, or the patterns that you have, or the people that you're doing life with currently. Maybe it's a little thing, like telling someone you're struggling or making that appointment to see the doctor. Maybe it's deciding to limit your access to certain foods, or alter your insane busy schedule, or set some needed boundaries that are draining you in your relationships. Maybe you're struggling to believe that you can do any of that. And I want to give you this mantra this morning. And I want you to read it in your mind as it's up on the screen. I'm brave enough to admit and to try to understand my pain. I am strong enough to work to move beyond it. And I have access to people who want to help me move forward. Let that be your mantra, instead of saying there is no hope. What if you began to believe that? Believe that for you in your life. You're not going to be able to snap out of it. I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to just snap out of it. But you do have what you need to take the next step. It will not go away on its own. No one else will miraculously free you from it. You have to choose to take action. You got to want to get better. And it will require a whole person approach to it. Because how you're living is the largest determiner of how you're feeling. In other words, what you're doing today is truly determining on how you're feeling. I was reminded by my wife, and I shared with one of my daughters this morning, that don't let all that is wrong in the world and all that is going not your way today prevent you from worshiping all that is right with God. In other words, yes, you may be going through some stuff, but everything that is right with God, He wants to unravel, show you, and take you, and bless you and lead you.